So let's take a look at Jupyter platform. So basically Jupyter is a platform where you can run your data analysis, machine learning, then scientific computing related code through Python or Ruby or other languages, and all of this can be done using a web interface which has a specific editor called Notebook. So we'll take a look at how to set up Jupyter. So if you go to jupyter.org, where you can find option to try it online or you can install it. So we'll do both. We'll see how it works online and also how we can install, setup and config. So if you open it in new tab, you'll find that it offers you option to use one of these three applications, which is hosted on MyBinder. So if you click on Jupyter Lab, it should open something like this, right? And it will be starting a demo repository, and within the Jupyter Lab you will find interface that looks something like this. Here you see a launcher option. On left hand side you will see the folder and the files, and also the menu that you can navigate, right? So here you can see within Notebook you can use C++ and Python code along with R code. So you can use both Notebook and console options, right? There is also the terminal, then text file, markdown file, Python file, R file, and support for these particular file formats, right? So whenever you want to create some new notebook within specific language, you just use this launcher and then choose the language for which you wish to use the notebook, right? We will go through all of this once we set it up for our own system, right? So let's close this online interface. Now let's come back to the Jupyter. To install this, you just have to click on this install button, and here you see the instruction required for installing it. So let's open command prompt or terminal or PowerShell, right? Now you can use pip3, then install, then call Jupyter Lab, or simply use pip install then Jupyter Lab, right? And if you hit enter, it should start the installation. Okay, one more thing to note here, that you need to have Python installed for Jupyter, right? So both Jupyter Lab and Notebook will work only if you have Python installed. Now at the end you will see that it has installed all these packages. It may also warn you if you have the older version of pip, and it will notify you of that. Currently it also says that could not install packages due to OS error, permission denied. So what you can do is instead of simply running this, make sure to go and open terminal as administrator, right? So when you do that, you will be able to install these packages. So what I will do is I will simply go back again, terminal, then more, then run as administrator, right? So if you run this as administrator, there should not be a problem for installing Jupyter Lab, right? So pip install Jupyter Lab, and then we hit enter. Okay, all the packages are already downloaded. What's left is installing it. So considering it has our admin privileges, it should install all of these, hopefully. Now here you can see we don't have any more errors, and it only has this warning for older pip version. Now that we have Jupyter Lab installed, next thing we can do is we will do pip install. Okay, before that let me just clear this because we are at the end of line. So here we use pip install and then notebook because we want to run code within web interface, so we need notebook. So as you can see, requirement already satisfied and installed. So we managed to install both Jupyter Lab and Notebook there. So let's clear this up. There is one more thing, which is Voila, that needs to be installed. As you can see, Voila can be installed by typing in pip install Voila, right? So we'll do that too. So pip install, then Voila, and the package is installed. Now let's clear this, and then we will open our terminal as is, and what we will do is we will simply type in Jupyter Notebook. Let's hope that it opens an instance, and we get to, okay, so here you see it is taking us to Jupyter web interface. If you have this interface open, that means you managed to set up your Jupyter, right? So here by default you get this view, right? So here going to new notebook, we will go through that later. So first thing we will do is we will see the files. So here you see it is showing me the file specific to documents within my system, right? And then there is also running option. So what's running? So there are no terminal instances or notebook running the Jupyter. Also there is cluster, that option we don't have either, right? So now what we'll do is we'll check files. Here you can upload new notebook file and also create new, right? So clicking on this new button will go for options like text file, folder, terminal, or Python notebook. So we'll be using Python notebook option to use Jupyter for most of our operation. Now what we will do is we will create a new notebook within our Jupyter interface. So let's say if I already have example and untitled Python notebooks, I can delete them by selecting this interface, click on delete, and they will be deleted. Now let's create a new notebook by clicking on this new button and then Python 3. Now here you will see that I have this interface where I can rename this notebook. So it is at the top where you can click on the file name and then click on the name of notebook, right? Now it is renamed. Now let's see, here you see file options that allows you to create new notebook. It allows you to make a copy or save as new notebook format. Then there are checkpoints, you can save them, revert to them, and also download your notebook into multiple formats like Markdown, Notebook, Python, PDF, HTML, ASCII, etc., right? And finally you can also close this notebook, right? So coming back to a few other options, you have edit for your cell editing, then there is view for toggling between header, toolbar, right? There is also insert above and below. And there are cell operations like run cell, run all, above and below, then type of cell, code, markdown, or raw notebook convert, right? So these are some of the options you will find. Then there is one more, which is kernel. You can interrupt, restart your notebook through this particular menu. You can also do the same through this toolbar as well. So those operations are listed here as well. Then there is also Voila that you can check, and it will open another tab, right? So currently we don't have any code, so it won't show anything on new tab, right? So unless we have something, it won't be displaying anything, right? Now here by default you have one cell where you can add markdown code. Let's see if I choose to add let's see, heading, right? Then we can simply run this and it should render that markdown. Now in next immediate cell we can create one number, give it value of 6, number 2, give it value of 9, and then total that shows this 15, or simply num that shows num1 and num2, right? And I want to print this out, so I will type in total, so I don't have to do this manually. So this is basically the Python code. So if I run this, it should show that particular output, right? So you don't have to do manual work. Just like you do on terminal, you can do so within this particular web interface, right? Now you have code markdown, then there is a raw NB convert. So if you choose a cell, call for raw NB convert, it will allow you to do that here. Then similarly, there is heading option which will take you to use markdown headings. So you use level 2 heading, previously we used that already, right? So these are some of the options that you can check and revert to, right? So if you go back to code, it will show you this in and then bracket. When you run the code, it will show you the number immediately, right? So basically this is the interface within which you will be executing your Python code, or if you work with NumPy, SciPy, Pandas, you can execute any of its output within this web-based interface. Now let's take a look at Jupyter Lab. So currently we have this Jupyter interface that is allowing us to create new Python notebook, text file, folder, or terminal. Now what if I want to work with other notebook like, let's say, R language or C++? So in that case, what we can do is we open a new terminal instance. Here let's type in Jupyter, then space lab. Okay, this should allow us to open another interface, okay, which is @/lab. So if you type in localhost, then this particular port, which is 888-9, then /, it should open the Jupyter Lab. So go through the console mode for opening that, right? So we used Jupyter, then space, then notebook to open this interface. So in case of lab, we use Jupyter, then space, then lab, right? It should open the current set of options. Now here you see by default you have this Python 3 kernel, right? We don't have option for C++ and R, right? That we have to do by manually installing those particular kernels for our Jupyter setup, right? So when you want to have a single launcher for launching your projects and notebook and console, and other options like terminal, text file, and markdown file, you can use lab. Also you get to navigate through your system just like your notebook interface that allows it, right? So Jupyter Lab is like a launcher, and it allows you to access via a set of options easily, right? So it also shows you options like running terminal kernel from left hand sidebar, right? Here you see open tabs, kernels, terminals, and there is also table of content, right? And the option for search. Currently, as you can see here, you need to manually enable it and check what's installed, and you can also discover what you can search through, right? So coming back to our folder options, here you see the list of the folders that you can access through, which is on your system, and navigate for the files that you store in notebook format. So think of Jupyter Lab as a one-way access in a dashboard for accessing your notebook's console, just like your notebook interface, but allows you to iterate through other set of options. Like apart from Python 3 kernel, you can also access C++, R if you install it. Now that we have seen Jupyter notebook interface and we also seen the Jupyter Lab interface. Let's take a look at one more thing that we left out, which is Jupyter Terminal. So if you go to Jupyter interface like this through Jupyter Space Notebook, you will find that if you go to New and then Terminal, you will get to access that particular terminal there, right? So it will show you Windows PowerShell access, and it will be replicating your local system, right? And similarly, if I close this and go through Jupyter Lab and click on the terminal from the launcher, it should show me the similar interface emulating my Windows PowerShell and showing me same options as my desktop interface, right? So basically this Jupyter Terminal is designed so that you don't have to manually go through desktop interface, because let's say if this particular Jupyter is installed on your company domain, you don't get to access that particular desktop. In such a case, you can use this terminal interface to access those local files stored over there and use them or get to open them like we do for opening these notebooks, right? So basically the job of this Jupyter Terminal is to get to access such files through remote interface. So currently we are on our own desktop, we don't require it, just like the we need for the remote interface.